Sometimes I don't feel like I'm in place. I've always been one of those outsiders, and I've never felt totally belonging among most social environments. Some of that is because I have interests that are not the norm. Like, I'm not a sports fan. I just don't have any interest in it. That's a big deal when you're out in the sport environment, having a drink in a bar, whatever. You're shrugging your shoulders. Who are you rooting for? I don't care. That's just one of those things that makes me an oddball, because the masses do care about things like that. But that doesn't mean I don't have my own interests, and that there are others with similar or the same interests, and I understand that also. It takes some nudging or aging into adult life to realize your place is available. You just have to find it. I've always been what I would call a late bloomer. Late to drive, late to date. I think I have some theories. I can talk, when I get better at talking on camera, I'll talk more specifics. As I get more skilled at storytelling, I'll divulge some more of my private life. But I've figured out in recent years why there's certain things I haven't done until late in life or later in life. I mean, I don't think my parents were considered helicopter parents, but there are certain things I just never did as a kid. And I fear. When you live life, you don't do things because of your comfort zone. And if you live in fear, you don't experience as much. And if you're not pushed, you're not going to experience things that you wouldn't otherwise experience. So I've realized there's things I didn't experience in my youth that I finally did in recent years. And of course, you could say it's regretful, but you can only deal with what you were offered. If your parents didn't push you to push harder, well, here we are. So now that I'm an adult, I'm on my own, I'm trying to find my way, I recognize I can always do things just a little bit later in life. I recently left home for 10 months. Never lived outside of my little territory for most of my life, all of my life, minus last year's experience up north. That was an excuse to try something new. Frankly, it would have been better if I had tried it 10 or 15 years earlier. I'm a little old to be experimenting, but fact of the matter is I don't have a wife or kids, so I did have that luxury at this point in life. So I'm glad I did it. It was definitely worth it, despite it having a lot of negativity. I think I've spoken of this plenty. My work experience was awful. 10 months up in Oregon, and I spent all my free time exploring, and that was worth it. I know what it's like to work in a toxic environment and still be confident enough to walk away. And that was worth it. It was a negative experience, but it was worth the experience because I learned from it. And it didn't kill me. You could say it made me stronger. It didn't make me bitter. It made me roll my eyes with annoyance. Dealing with toxicity, narcissism, immaturity, and just plain incompetence. It gets frustrating. But you understand when you're smart and you are competent, whatever, you start to see how others are failures. And I don't mean to put myself on a pedestal, but it's like, oh, I'm not the failure I thought I was. And you start to find yourself rubbing shoulders with others, trying to do their thing. It's like, dude, what are you doing? You're not doing it right. And then you realize they either don't have the intellect, or two, they're not mature enough. The fact is, we all have one thing in common, which makes us the screw-offs that we are. That's the trauma that made us what we are. I've spoken of this in the past. I'm not as productive, haven't as completed as much. Had I not experienced certain traumas, I would have succeeded a little bit further. I understand that, and it's taken me years to figure it out. I don't know where I'd be otherwise, but I understand it is now my job to find my place. I have to not be anxious and not shoehorn my way into a place just because society says that's what I'm supposed to do. I've been trying hard to figure out how I'm supposed to work in a regular environment. I just had this conversation with a friend. He's asking me about my work situation, about finding work, and I told him what the deal is. I spoke of getting a job at an MSP, a managed service provider, which is essentially a company that has nothing but IT professionals who offer up support for companies who don't want us full time. And the other way to get a job is often through a temp agency. Either way, there's a bunch of overhead, which means I don't get paid a livable wage. And he agreed, he understood. We also both understand that there's probably a legal separation that they're leaning on, which is why they don't want to hire someone like me full time. Huge companies, small companies. I think the one size company, that's the other part of the conversation we had earlier, is do some research online and figure out what my niche is. So what I'm going to do is do some research about what companies I work with. Not necessarily to get a job, although that is an option, but if I'm going to stick to working on my own, be my own MSP, and start working with these little companies, put myself out there and working with them, I could get monthly stipends from them. Even if it doesn't get that lucrative, I can get occasional work from them. But I have to at least find them, and these companies need to be the niche that I can provide for, because I don't want huge companies. I'm a one-man band. I can't take on a giant network. I also need the company to be big enough to where it would make sense for them to hire someone more than once. So I'm finding my way, recognizing what I am, and opening my horizons. I'm recognizing my consciousness. And that's the other thing. When you're talking to others, you have to figure out what the other person is thinking, because you might be perceived as different. You have no idea. Without an in-depth conversation over the course of hours, you're not going to know whether someone is highly capable of interviewing. They might be reading you totally different. Now, I like to bite my tongue. I don't like to overspeak, and I'm thinking a lot of times you can actually lose a job opportunity or any sort of potential opportunity by not shutting up. It's just like with good sales. There are a few times when I probably just overspoke. So you have to realize that just because you're not the form-fitted glove that everyone else seems to have fit in, you're not so broken that you don't have a place in life. I know I've got plenty of room to grow and plenty of places to go. As soon as I calm down, the anxiety is only going to slow me down. If I slow down, it goes away.